Okay, and everybody is off to the races. This week's a little bit different. As I said, you turned in your data analysis on the working and learning conditions surveys Monday for the school district that you were looking at. I will be looking at those, and I hopefully will have those back pretty soon. Do want to take a little bit of time and talk tonight about the assignment you have due Sunday evening. Now, this is a little bit different. Just to kind of get this so that you're paying attention with it. There is there's an article that's listed on the syllabus. It's called "Changing the Classroom Teacher's Lead," and I think that's I think it's in Reading Rockets. That's one you could do. But I also put an article on this week on teacher leadership. And when tonight's class is over, I've got another one I will email to you when I send you the follow-up email from tonight's Zoom session. And the reason why I'm going to send that to you is because of one particular reason. I want you to have some opportunities to be able to look at some things. And I know with everything going on right now, everybody doesn't necessarily have time to hit the library. Okay, I know those of you who are in schools. Officially, school will end next week for just about every public school in North Carolina. So, so I saw that. That was funny though. I mean, look, you're not the only one feeling that way right now. This is the year like the bad house guest. It just wouldn't go home. It would not go away. And so, that being said, I know what I really empathize with everybody. I don't say I know what everybody went through, but I empathize with everybody. But that being said, I just want you to just think a little bit about the next week or so. I know you all, particularly if you're in schools, you guys are collecting textbooks. You guys are, collecting library books. Kids are having to come to the building, turn in the technology and all that kind of stuff. You got a lot of things going on. But one of the things about this particular situation was I put one article on the syllabus for week 4 you could do. I'm going to send you another one. This is just merely because of the situation being more than most people accepted or expected to have happen this semester and this summer. So that being said, I felt like the thing I could do was maybe give you all the chance to do something without having to just pull your hair out trying to get it done. Okay. Now, that being said, is there anything anybody's got any questions about? We're at week 4 now. We're a month from the end of this course. Is there anything that I can help anybody with at this point? Okay, have y'all got audio? Have y'all got audio with me?
Yeah, I was
Yes.
curious about the shadowing assignment. How does that work in the
Well,
summer?
the shadowing assignment is going to change, so don't worry.
Okay. So
Because of the fact that you all weren't going to be in school buildings and you guys weren't going to be able to see people, we're going to structure that a little bit differently. I'll send out some email information about that within the next week or so for you. But I will tell you this: one of the things that I will say is that with everything going on, I know that one's going to have to be restructured. So just don't worry about that. We'll take care of it. And trust me, it will be something that'll be very manageable for you all to deal with. Okay. But like I said, you have one article there you could do. I have another article. Now, if you are just wanting to go to the library and choose a teacher leadership article to critique, then that's fine. You can certainly do that. I'm not going to tell you not to do it, because initially that's what we normally do when we do this class. But that being said, I think that with everybody dealing with the end of the school year coming up, that sometimes if you can just catch a little break, if you can catch a little break on what's going on, I think that all things considered, it's just helpful, and hopefully we'll be able to navigate this whole the school year and into the first part of the summer for you all. Let me ask you all a question. Just thinking about the things that we've talked about up to this point, and thinking about the concept of teacher leadership a little bit. You know, tonight we're going to be looking at the idea of PLCs, and we're going to be looking at the ideas of how teachers collaborate with each other, and just want to kind of start that a little bit tonight. Can can you all share some experiences, collaboration experiences that you all use in your own school buildings when you guys are collaborating or you're doing PLCs? How many of you are in schools where PLCs are standard practice? Okay. What does a PLC look like in your school? Let's just share a little bit about how they're organized and what they look like.
They're conducted after the school day is over with, for sure. We're all in a classroom setting or in our teacher lounge if it's
Mhm.
available, if no further testing are being done at the end of the day.
Uh-huh.
And we are, it's in a relaxing setting, nobody's uptight, everybody's, eager and ready to learn something new. So we're all sitting at the table and we have our pencils and pens, and most of the time we're required to bring something to the meeting, and we share what we're bringing, and then we get our lesson, and we.
Okay. Let me ask you this. You mentioned that you do these and everybody comes to share. Um, how are these things organized? Are they organized through, say, you know, you all have a book that you're reading together as a staff, or maybe you're having a book you're looking at as a department or a grade level, or maybe you're looking at a certain skill set? How are they organized in your schools?
We use the North Carolina, the Foundations book. That's the main thing that we speak about, and how to um, relate it to the lesson plan and the next level, and how how we can use it to take a student to the next level where they should be going.
Okay. How many of you guys do data analysis? How many of y'all do data analysis in your PLCs?
I do. That's what I was going to say. Ours is more data driven. We start off with our norms and agenda, and then we go in and start to dissect the data and look at the students that mastered the standard, the student that didn't master the standard, and then we talk about the instructional strategies to use to try to remediate those students.
Okay. You know, one of the things that's kind of an interesting thing, and I'm going to point this out, and like I said, I'm not trying to get political. Every day, the governor and the director of health and human services comes on TV about 2 o'clock, 2:30. Okay, and they give you kind of an update of what's going on. And the governor makes a comment, and every single day, he and the director of health and human services say the same thing. They say, we're going to rely on our data to help us determine next steps as we reduce the situation to open up what we're doing as far as our business is concerned. He relying on the data. And one of the things I'll tell you about a good PLCs are driven by data. Okay. And I'm going to just say that, you know, I think one of the things people don't necessarily always think about with, with data is that as we're talking about data and as we're talking about what goes on when when we're working together in our PLCs, is that data kind of sets a roadmap for where you need to go. Okay. Now, how many of you've really been talked to about how to take apart data?
Mm, yeah.
That's one of the things that happens a lot of times in schools, and particularly those of you who are coming in as lateral entry folks, or you're coming in as residency candidates and you're teaching. You know, one of the things that's so interesting is that with data, and particularly when we're talking about PLCs, if you know your kids' data, one of the things that's great is it helps you figure out how to write a lesson plan, how to address issues, how to address mastery issues, and also how to address things that maybe people aren't looking at. Because one of the downsides of all the data we look at, if we look at the school report card, or we look at your classes data on the end of grade test, or data on an assessment, if you're given the NC check-ins or whatever you're given, grades 3 through 8, or, one of the things about it is this: teachers who are real teacher leaders have already taken apart their data and they've already gone through it. And one of the things that's an interesting part about that is this, is that, for example, what was the mark in the sand I gave everybody when you were doing the analysis of the teacher work and learning conditions survey?
70%.
Where should you be concerned? What was that, Pam?
70%.
70%. If it was below 70%, it's an area that might need to be looked at. Now, the one thing about that is that, for example, if I'm in a class of fourth graders and we're taking a reading assessment, and I'm having a hard time with my kids understanding author's purpose. Say we got 3 questions on an assessment we gave, and 60% of the class missed those 3 questions. That means I'm going to need to spend some time with author's purpose. What was the intention of the author in writing a piece for you to read? Okay. So I'm going to spend some time on that, because that's an area that I clearly need to understand that my students don't have mastery of at this point. Okay. So that helps me structure. But let me ask you this. Now, 70% was the line I gave you all. But let me ask you this. I noticed some of y'all did this. Y'all went backward into 2016, 2014 to look at the data. And one of the things that you look at when you do that is what's referred to as trend data. And for example, those of you who went back looking at trend data might have seen that even though something did not meet 70%, it got better all along. Anybody find something like that in their data?
Yeah.
Where it got better every time the survey was given?
Or worse.
Yeah.
Oh, it could have gotten worse. Yes, that is true. It could have gotten worse. And that's one of the things I think that people don't necessarily think about, is that sometimes even though you didn't get to your line in the sand, knowing what's there and where they came from. For example, if I had a group of kids who had to let's say we were working on a math assessment on the NC check-ins, and we're looking at numbers-based 10. Everybody see that one before? MBT? All right. Let's just say that we give the first benchmark, and we got 15% of our kids who can do the problems dealing with numbers-based 10. Okay. All right. We give it again at the mid-year, and we don't have 70%, but we've got, say, 55% of the kids who are doing it. You've got a tremendous piece of growth there from the first benchmark to the next benchmark. You got a tremendous growth in there. And that's one of the things that people can talk about with PLCs, because PLCs are basically for what? Tell me about PLCs. What are PLCs basically for, as far as you guys are concerned, besides the fact that your principal makes you go to them?
Well, with what we've been through, I'm an art teacher. Without the PLCs, I'd have been dead in the water. I'm older. I'm not tech savvy. The art for the county PLC and learning from those other art teachers who were tech savvy
Sweet.
has helped me out tremendously. And the PLC for the specials in the school, again, we've been collaborating and working together and teaching each other.
Well, and that's one of the things you bring up, Pam, that is really good about a PLC. A PLC is designed to help find best practices, to help discuss, theory, helps discuss things that can be done to improve performance, and one of the biggest things where as a teacher leader you can really help out with PLCs is really keeping PLCs practice focused versus, you know, complaint sessions, because, you know, a PLC can degenerate into a complaint session in a hurry if it's not managed. And that's one of the things I always, you know, when I was a principal, I always thought it was important to sit in a PLC and participate, because of the fact that, you know, not necessarily that I was, you know, okay. Thank you, sweetie. I'm sorry. She's just running. She's just running in. She's being silly tonight. But one of the things that's always kind of important is keeping track of what's going on. Because as an administrator, you know, I want to know what's happening in particular grade level or particular class. You know, I don't want to be in a situation where I don't know what's going on as far as the instruction is concerned. But at the other time too, sometimes you just have to have someone to facilitate. You know, and one of the things that happens, and that's where as teacher leaders, good teacher leaders naturally assume that facilitator's role. Um, you know, how many of you do PLCs where, say, the the grade chair or the subject department chair conducts the PLC? Anybody work in schools where that's actually done versus the administrators doing it?
Yeah.
Okay, Caleb, what's it like in your school? Tell me a little bit about it.
Well, actually, my former school did it that way. So every Thursday, the arts elective teachers would all meet. This particular school, a band teacher, a visual arts teacher. I was vocal music, and they had a creative writing teacher, which I had never heard of in a middle school before. But we met every Thursday, and we troubleshooted problems that we would all see and trends, and how we were addressing them in our classrooms. All of our classrooms were very, very different. I mean, each of those subject areas requires totally different classroom management schemes. But I mean, as far as I'm doing this, what are you doing here? I like that idea. I can take that. In this particular school, a lot of what we talked about was classroom management issues. It was just a really interesting demographic of students. But on the same token, this school, I'll say their literacy rate was super, super low. They were really just not really great readers, which I think is across the board something we find nowadays. So it was as simple as, how are you dealing with that? Yeah. As a teacher that works in band, they might not be doing a whole lot of reading, but as a course teacher, I think what I teach, I do a lot of history in my class as well as singing, because you can't really sing every day. I mean, it is what it is. So there was a lot of troubleshooting involved in those particular PLCs. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's a good example of what we're talking about, because, you know, you mentioned literacy in this particular school. Let me ask you a question. Were there ways that you all incorporated literacy into what you all were doing for the overall good of the students?
Oh yeah, well, certainly the creative writing teacher definitely did. I mean, because it was a writing class and they looked at novels and things like that. But I know from my class, I tried to incorporate some writing and reflection, which I know the art teacher always spent a lot of time on, because they don't, and at middle school, they are honing that evaluative skill, where I look at a piece of artwork, I listen to a piece of music, and I can say if I like it, and then why or why not.
Okay.
So I think the literacy portion, I think that's the best way, besides saying, read this article, because I would always read aloud to them. But I think the literacy portion, if they can write it, that was how I best worked it out.
Well, that's a good point to bring up. You know, particularly middle school. I spent a lot of time in middle school as well. And one of the things that I always found interesting was, particularly, anybody in here work on an interdisciplinary team in middle school? Anybody teaching on a 2 or 4 person team? You know, ELA, math, science, and social studies. Anybody? One of the things about middle school that lends itself to PLCs better than any other level is the fact that the team is the strength of the middle school. When you get 4 teachers together and they've been together for a while and they know each other and they know how to plan, and, you know, I used to love, when I taught middle school, I used to love setting up field trips because everybody could get involved. We always did, we always did these scavenger hunt type things where when you went on a field trip someplace, there were things you had to write down and things you had to do and things you had to look for. You know, and I thought it was great because you had 4 teachers who were the 4 core area teachers, and these kids were on a field trip, so you could pull all these things together. You know, and I think that's one of the things that people miss in the middle school, is that the middle school really lends itself well to PLCs because of the fact that, you know, the team is really the core section of each grade level. You know, you have 2 teams or 3 teams in each grade level, and some of them maybe 2 teacher teams, some of them maybe 4 teacher teams, you know, some of them maybe 3 teacher teams. But knowing that every day you were going to get together with your team and you were going to plan, that also gave you opportunities to explore some things as well. And, you know, one of the things I will tell you with PLCs is this: PLCs, even if you're in an NC pre-K program or you're in a preschool, you know, the idea when you're getting together to meet, you know, I think it's really a good thing, particularly from a teacher leadership standpoint, to maybe someone introduce something that maybe someone has some concerns about because of one particular reason. Most of the time, our meetings end up being what I call administrivia. You know, the administrator stands up there and barks at you for an hour and fusses about who drove in the parking lot late in the morning and who's sneaking out off the campus to do this or do that in the middle of the day, and somebody saw somebody in a McDonald's drive-through and called the school and things like that. You know, the whole thing about your meetings is meetings, the way things have happened, you know, we can handle a lot of the administrivia electronically. Meetings now need to be sessions in which the staff learns from each other and they learn by exploring things. And, you know, and like I said, I love good staff development for that reason. If it's good staff development that, you know, you're going to revisit over and over again, is great. Because I know as a classroom teacher, the one thing I hated when we started having meetings, like if we had staff development and they let the kids go and we were going to have a staff development day and someone was coming in, the part that got me, the part that frustrated me more than anything else was the fact that they bring somebody in who had absolutely nothing to do with what you really needed to know about. And you were just, man, you were praying for their car to drive out of the parking lot, man. It was like you were waiting, let that car leave this parking lot so we don't have to deal with this again, you know. Because, you know, some of it is top down. I will tell you, some of it's top down. But let's take a few minutes and talk just a little bit. I wanted to bring this up for just a second. How many of you, and I'm probably going to show y'all how much of a nerd I am here when I say this, how many of you watched the History Channel, the 3-night thing on Ulysses S. Grant? Anybody see that over the past few nights? Okay. All right.
Brother and
How many
Dad
of you
watch it every night.
Huh?
I said my brother and Dad watch it every night. We have to be out of the living room for them to watch it.
Well, the reason why I bring this up is because if you have started looking at some of the Lincoln on Leadership stuff that was connected to what we're doing, I'm going to talk a little bit briefly about it. They made a lot of allusions to Lincoln's leadership style and Grant's leadership styles, and they were very similar. You know, in other words, for example, you know, one of the parts they bring up is the fact that Grant surrounded himself with good people to help do what he had to do. And they mentioned the particular part at the end of the Civil War when Lee comes in to surrender. Lee comes by himself. Grant brings his staff, you know, and each of his staff have a role in the surrender. Well, you know, one of the things about Lincoln on Leadership, Lincoln was real big on the fact that you put the right people in the right places to make the difference in what you wanted to do. And, you know, and for example, you know, whenever you looked at some of the things that they point out with Lincoln, when you get the Phillips book, and I'm going to send some things out, some little short pieces tonight as well, just because of the fact that, you know, if you haven't bought the book, don't have a fit trying to find it. But the thing that was kind of interesting was, you know, Lincoln always wanted to be where things were. Okay. He wanted to know what was going on. Lincoln probably was the first president to really use technology for the purpose of doing his job. Okay. One of the things that's very interesting, and I'll bring this up, is that he wanted to know what was going on, when it was going on. He wanted a thumb on the pulse of everything. And matter of fact, there are excerpts in the book where he goes down to the U.S. Army Telegraph Office every night. He walks from the White House. It's a whole different world when your president could walk from the White House to the U.S. Army Telegraph Office and not get shot. But that being said, but he was waiting for these telegraph reports that were coming in to the War Department so that he could know what was going on. Well, one of the things that's kind of interesting is that, particularly in the latter parts of the American Civil War, Grant was very actively using telegraphs and sending telegrams to Washington, D.C. so that Lincoln was in the loop and everybody else was in the loop as to what was going on. So that being said, one of the things that's really important when I talk about PLCs, one of the things I think is really important is being able to get out and share information, being able to get out and find out what's going on, circulating. One of the best principals I ever worked for as a classroom teacher, I love this guy, and I'm going to tell you, this little story because of the fact that I think it kind of pulls in the whole idea of, leadership. And, there are two different kinds of school administrators. I'll tell you, there's the gotcha school administrator, and there's the I want to help you school administrator. Okay. The gotcha one was the one that you had to be scared of because they wanted to, if you did something they didn't like, they didn't want to coach you into doing better. They wanted you to go on and leave their school. They were done with you. Well, this principal that I had, I was teaching in a middle school, and I had this one particular young man, and he thought he was something of a basketball player, and he would spend half the class just running his mouth. And I'd had enough, and I asked him to step out in the hallway one day, and I leaned over close into his ear, and I said, I'm going to be honest with you. We are not holding the Jackass Convention here today, and you are not speaking. And I didn't think anything of it. I didn't do it in front of the class. I pulled him out in the hallway and I whispered it in his ear. And I figured, I'd heard coaches say worse to kids, and I figured, I hadn't said anything bad. Well, anyway, about 2 weeks later, I'm walking down the hallway with my principal. And he reaches over and he puts his arm around my shoulders and he says, Mr. Gainey, as long as you and I are in this building together, please don't ever call a student a jackass again. And he walked on down the hall. That's all he had to do. Point was taken, never a problem. And to be honest with you, I was a lot younger and I didn't think a whole lot when I did stuff. Sometimes you just don't. When you're younger, you're thinking, well, I'm not going to worry about it, But it was kind of interesting because that was all that ever had to be said. Like I said, they're get you principles and they're help you principles. And he definitely was a help me principal. He was one that actually helped me become a better classroom teacher and a better classroom manager because he wasn't trying to get anybody. He didn't want to run you off. He wanted to make you better so that you didn't have to worry about what happened. But I will tell you this, I thought about that every time I had to deal with a young teacher, particularly if they lost their cool with a group of kids. Because I'm going to tell you that first year you teach or that second year you teach, if you're a young teacher and you're brand new, and even if you're an older teacher and you're brand new, you're going to make some foolish mistakes. You are going to and it's nothing other than the fact that it takes time to learn those jobs. One of the things I will say is this. I've watched more teachers leave the profession and go become very successful in other professions than any other people who've gone to other professions from other jobs. And I'll say that because of one reason, because teachers, it's a difficult job. We do a difficult job. And because we do a difficult job, we have to do a number of things. You think about all the managerial things that teachers do, all the planning things teachers do, all the things they have to do creatively. They have to create stuff on a regular basis. and they have to be on top of the data, on top of the research. I mean, you think about the things you do in a day in a school building, and you think about that you're going to do roughly 1,500 instructional hours in 180 school days. You're going to do the same number of hours of work that your colleagues in other fields are going to do, and they're going to get to spread theirs out over 12 months. You're going to do yours over 10. You know, so it takes some real doing as a teacher to be a teacher leader and to do what needs to be done. And like I said, you know, one of the things I tell people all the time, when you get in these PLCs, you know, you got no one to rely on but each other. So learn from each other as much as you can, because that's the way it works, is that the more you learn from your colleagues and the more they learn from you, the tighter that team will become and the better the kids will be served. But real quick, let's just take a few minutes and talk about the assignment that's due Sunday night. Now, Sunday night, your critique is due. Like I said, you have your, I put an article on there. I'm going to send you another article tonight. And I'm also going to send you some information about how to write a critique, okay? And it's really very simple. If you just give me a couple of minutes, we'll talk about it. A critique is very simple. You start off, you summarize the article, you point out the positives after you've summarized it, you point out the areas where you might differ with the author and why you might differ, and maybe even make suggestions as to how what the author has proposed might be done in a different way. And it may be that you read the article and you agree 100% with everything that the person's done, and you're just analyzing the article. You're analyzing the article for what it is. But I'm going to send that to you. There's a lot of stuff that's going to come in this email tonight to you all. Now, is there anything that anybody needs to ask? Anybody got questions that maybe they just feel like they need to ask before the night? Yes, Samantha.
For the impressions of the meeting observed, is it okay if we do like an online school board meeting? Because I'm not in a school right now, so I don't have any meetings that I could go to.
Yeah, you can do that. Now, those of you that would be fine, Samantha, but also those of you who are in schools, you know, granted, you know, you've probably had online meetings since we left on the 13th of March. If you're in schools and you've participated in Zoom meetings with your administration or with your department or with your grade levels, you know, certainly feel free to use any of those meetings to do that when you look at that information. I think that was for the forum, wasn't it? Observing the meetings. Okay. Now, let me go back and remind everybody one more time about the forums, guys, because this is important. I don't want anybody to flip out and say, oh my gosh, I missed the forum, I got a 0. Okay. What I'm looking at is at the end of the semester that you all have done the forums, that you all have responded to each other. I mean, I read the first ones, and I really enjoyed reading the first ones. I think it was fun going in there after you guys had all had a chance to respond to each other and to reply. I think it was great because, you know, I really got to see some serious thought on some things, and it was just fun. And I enjoy reading them, but the forums more than anything else are to allow you all to have the opportunity to have dialogue with each other. If we were sitting in a classroom, you would naturally assume ways to have dialogue with each other. Matter of fact, I would bet you money every time an assignment came down the pike, 2 or 3 of y'all would probably pass out phone numbers to each other and everything, because that's what we do when we're sitting in a classroom. But this is the way that you're able to have dialogue with each other. And if you want to think about it like this, your forums are basically y'all's PLC for this course. Because if you're doing them and you're responding to your classmates, then you all are sharing information and you all are sharing ideas. And that's what a PLC is all about. Like I said, good PLCs leave people coming out with their, I hate to say it like this because it's going to sound bad, with their heads spinning because they're like, wow, man, I didn't think I'd get all that, and all of a sudden I got all this information. A good PLC works like that. A bad PLC turns out to be a gripe session. And that's why I suggest to you all as teachers, help control the climate of your PLCs. Go in and be that person that says, hey, we're having this trouble with getting these kids to understand the water cycle in 5th grade science. And, I was thinking about this, and look, I found this little video, and, I got to looking at it. Then I thought, wouldn't it be kind of cool if we swung this over to the music teacher and they wrote a song about raining and evaporation and stuff like that. That's where a good PLC, where so many different ideas bounce off, and they really kind of take root and become something you can do something with. I mean, for example, those of you who are familiar with PBIS, how many of you use PBIS in your schools? Positive Behavior Instructional Support.
Yes.
You call it the 4 B's, be safe, be responsible, be respectful, be safe and healthy. The 4 B's or the 5 B's or whatever you want to call it. PBIS is a prime example of how a PLC did what it was supposed to do. Okay. And I will tell you, if you get a chance, if you get a chance to look at things, Rick Dufour was one of the first people to really push the concept of the PLC. And he's one of those characters that in education, particularly in the past 30 years, who's had a real impact on the restructuring of schools and how schools are supposed to operate and how schools are supposed to be better. Like I said, I would really think about what you can do when you get into PLCs, because PLCs can make or break your school year. They can help your school year go smooth, particularly if you're new in the profession, and they can also help your school year go just high and to the right, if they're not properly done. But one thing about them is that the attitude has a lot to do with how a PLC turns out. Now, Sunday night by midnight, your article critique has to be there. Like I said, meetings are going to be kind of hard for us to look at because of the way that everything's happened. But particularly if you can use a department meeting, grade level meeting, staff meeting that you did online or whatever, I'll allow you to use the online meetings that you've had to do this spring. Is that okay? Is everybody okay with that? All right. Well, look, it is 7:45 and I'm about to run out of recording space. So you all have a good weekend. Be safe. We're getting down into the last part of things. How many of you are going to do graduation here within the next week or so with your schools? Any? Okay. All right. Graduation is going to be a little bit different, y'all. So, just remember, the thing is you may not ever have a graduation like this ever again for the rest of your career. So just observe and learn from it. That's the only thing I'm going to tell you is observe and learn from it, because it can be very, very different this time. But you all have a good night. I'm going to be sending that out to you momentarily as soon as I download the video, okay? Hey, before I go anywhere, let me ask you this before I hang up. Are you guys able to access the videos from our sessions? When I send the emails out, are y'all able to access the YouTube videos?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to be sure, because like I said, if they weren't, then I was going to have to come up with another way. Anyway, but I will see you all. You know how to get up with me if you need me. My phone is always on. Just don't call me in the middle of the night. Don't call me on Sunday morning, and I'm good. All right? Y'all take care. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. You as well.
Bye.
Bye.